All right, let's bring in the Kagiso community. Pardon me, the Kagiso community, just as background for you, is just one of many across the country grappling with this issue of a sewage spill crisis. Less and less wastewater is being treated in South Africa, even though our population is growing. In fact, recent data is showing that the volume of wastewater reaching South Africa's treatment plants did not grow from 2013 to 2021, even though the population increased by almost or more than 5.5 million people, so about 10%. Let's unpack the story now. Mark Graham is an aquatic ecologist at the Centre for Water Resources Research. Mark, it's great to talk to you, and I think it's perhaps important as well to look at some of the background, just so we get the terminology right in this discussion. Shall we get an explanation from you on what is wastewater?
Essentially, wastewater is that water that if we flush our toilets, and those of us fortunate enough to have running wastewater treatment systems that have wastewater connected to them, flushing toilets, essentially that water lands up at a wastewater treatment plant, and that water can be treated there, should be safely, and then that's discharged back into the environment at a safe level, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? The water is meant to, this wastewater is meant to travel through intact pipes to be cleaned at wastewater works.
Yeah, exactly. So the entire sewage system is designed around an intact reticulation system that can take the sewage from our places where we live or work and take that to a sewage treatment plant where it can be treated. But what we're finding increasingly is the work that we've been doing and the research is showing that, in fact, this is a problem in that much of the sewage now is not, a lot of it is not actually getting even to the sewage works. And we know that many reports are showing us that the sewage works are struggling to treat the sewage, but if it's not even getting there, it's landing up in the environment somewhere, in somebody's river, in somebody's back garden, and that's hugely problematic.
Mm. So this means, according to the research you've done, Mark, that the wastewater is going missing somewhere along the route to the wastewater treatment works. I mean, we've seen an example of that in the community of Kagiso, west of Johannesburg, where there are pipes that are just spilling out. Like you can see the pipe is constantly pushing out vast amounts of water, and residents say, just merely because of the stench in the area, that it must be leaking sewage.
That's right, and that's just one case study, but our research is showing, and the people like the Duzi Mgani Conservation Trust here in the Pietermaritzburg, Durban area, there's records here of that sort of thing happening for up to more than months, but approaching years in many cases, where known discharge points, raw sewage is finding its way into the river systems. And this is a failure of governance, municipal infrastructure and so on, but it's hugely problematic for many, many reasons as this affects the environment, people living around there. Communities downstream are hugely at risk, in terms of getting illnesses, can't get to work, kids not getting to school, and that just has a ripple through effect into society, and as it affects everyone there.
It affects everyone, but most of the people impacted will be the most vulnerable people, the marginalized and the poor. In fact, we've got figures here that talk about putting the environment at risk. Poor hygiene, sanitation, poor water quality is a huge part of that. And every year around 1.5 million people die as a result of poor water, sanitation and hygiene.
That's right. But it cross-cuts, because it's not only the marginal communities downstream who typically don't have access to clean drinking water, but it's also these impacts are affecting the broader society, as we were seeing with things like increased water treatment costs, things like alien aquatic weeds that land up in the dams that just love this additional nutrients coming in there. We're getting water losses from the increased evaporation. We've just been very, very fortunate to have had some wet seasons, but as we approach dry seasons, this enormous increase in water loss through weeds and so on is affecting the broader society, industry, and it's cross-cutting. So it's not just isolated, it's a broad system risk.
Yeah, so it's shocking. We're going either way with this, right? We're treating less wastewater, but our population is growing. So the question becomes, what do we do? And I think the answer is quite simple. We need an overhaul of the system.
We need an overhaul, but we also just need, we have to hold government officials and authorities to account. So water affairs need to be doing their job. Their job is to protect the water resources. Municipal authorities need to invest in the infrastructure. They have budgets for this sort of thing. Treating and fixing wastewater treatment works and reticulation systems to getting the sewage to the works is certainly not a sexy or interesting kind of occupation, but it's critical. Budgets have to be held and circumscribed for that sort of work and not spent in other places where there might be other demands. We have to spend the money, look after these systems to make sure that they do their work and hold the officials accountable for doing the jobs that they should be doing.
Yeah, and at the extreme end of the spectrum, not too long ago, 2022, was when we had that cholera outbreak in Hammanskraal, right? These are some of the effects of a lack of proper sanitation wastewater treatment plants.
Absolutely. And, that was a blip in the ocean. But from the research we're doing, that is going to be increasingly this very, very significant risk for our country. And we can least afford that. And we don't need another Hammanskraal to identify the issue. It's well known. The science is there. The engineers are there. It's just a question of political will now and holding people to account to get on and do their jobs to make sure we don't land up in that situation again. Because if we don't, it's virtually guaranteed we will land up in that position again.